Welcome to the Staffing Playbook podcast, your go-to resource for navigating the dynamic world of staffing and HR. I'm your host, Stephen Farrell. Join me each week as we dive deep into the strategies, insights, and stories that shape the staffing industry. From the latest trends to expert interviews and practical tips, we'll equip you with the right tools and knowledge to succeed in the staffing industry. Whether you're a seasoned professional or just starting out, the Staffing Playbook is here to help you play your best game. Let's get started.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the Staffing Playbook podcast. I'm your host, Stephen Farrell. In this episode, episode 18, we're going to be talking about building people-first cultures. I am joined by Charlie Safro. She is the CEO and founder of CS Recruiting. Welcome, Charlie. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Steve. Thanks for having me on. I'm excited for our conversation.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you. The first time we have met, first time we have spoken. So today's going to be a lot of fun. I'm going to give just a brief introduction about you, Charlie. You can tell me if I've completely slaughtered it.
Go for it.
Charlie here, she's a renowned thought leader. She's a keynote speaker. She was featured in a recent TEDx talk. From what I've learned, just watching some of her videos, reading her content, she is a passionate advocate for transforming leadership and workplace culture. What I've learned from you, Charlie, is you believe that thriving workplaces begin with the leaders who model that authenticity, openness, and trust. And that really just sets a foundation for strong, empowered teams. And so that's what I've learned about you and learned to appreciate. Did I miss anything?
No, that could be my new elevator pitch. I appreciate it.
Love it. So in this episode with Charlie, we're going to explore what it means to create a people-first workplace culture, which is near and dear to my heart. We're going to talk about how to prioritize employee well-being and how that can reduce turnover and really just drive business results. And then we're going to get into some practical strategies for fostering inclusion and trust and collaboration. So I'm excited to get this started, Charlie.
Yep. Sounds like we have a lot in common to talk about. So let's talk some shop.
Let's talk some shop. So I want to know, when it comes to culture, I listened to your TEDx talk recently and I was really inspired by it. What inspired your passion for building people?
You're breaking up a little, but you with me here? Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, repeat the question if you don't mind.
Yeah, sorry. I really, out of curiosity, what inspired your passion for building people-first cultures, and how has that shaped your journey as a leader?
So I don't think I ever was intentionally focused on building a people-first culture until I was intentionally focused on it, if that makes sense. So when I started my business, I was a solopreneur and it was just me for about 1.5 years. And then I went out and hired my first employee. And what I didn't realize was I was building the culture by bringing this individual on, my interview style, the onboarding process, the way we worked together and communicated. And then we hired our second employee and then our third. And I always say culture is like design or default, but it's usually a little bit of both. And I, as a woman, I'm I'm feminine and I am generous and I'm empathetic. And I think that is really where it started. I wasn't going to hide that. I was myself and I showed up authentically and wanted to take care of my employees. I'd been in jobs before I started my company where I had really felt seen and heard. And then I had been in companies where I didn't. And I, knew the difference and I knew what I wanted. So I'd say like it wasn't intentional until it became intentional. And that was at a point where, as we continued to scale, it gets harder every time you add someone and you're trying to maintain a culture you believe in. And it's always going to shift, but that's the point. Hopefully you're adding new opinions, new ideas, new, backgrounds to your culture. And that is making up what it is today.
I can appreciate that. I've worked for quite a few companies in my career, and I've been part of great cultures. I've been part of, you can't even call it a culture. And then I've been part of companies that really have lost their culture.
Mm-hmm.
And, I've worked for some large companies and some small ones. And I find it's not always the case, but just in my career, the smaller companies were kind of where you were at as you were building your cultures. Like, you may have a set of values, intrinsically that you try to live, maybe try to embrace as a company, but you start really understanding what works in your company and your culture, and you see, how people behave and react, and you start just adding to that.
Yeah.
And that's a really fun process to be part of when you get to grow it yourself and define what that culture really looks like.
It is. And it's like, we are in such a unique position that I think for many years I took for granted. Everything you just said is, it starts with the leader, and it doesn't matter what industry you're in, what type of product or service you sell. But being in recruiting gives us a whole different perspective. And that is something that I've really embraced and just tried to observe as much as I can so I can understand the best practices. And when you really think about it, I mean, I've been recruiting 20 years. You're probably somewhere, maybe a little less, but I've had a front row seat to seeing what works, especially in our industry. So I myself have talked to thousands and thousands of job seekers, not to mention the hundreds of thousands that my team has spoken to, and hundreds of companies and leaders. And you see and hear why people join companies, why people leave companies, why someone, decides they're going to stay after they thought they were going to leave, and vice versa. And that is what I've tried to apply to my business more intentionally over the years. So in the beginning, it was more of like that default, and it just started to create itself. And just through those observations and really understanding what people want and need has been huge to just apply it to our culture and, at least try to set a standard and inspire other leaders in, our industry and community to follow suit.
Yeah. Speaking of observations, I used to believe the notion of you probably learn the best from bad leaders, because you want to be the opposite of that bad leader. And there's some truth to that. Like, I learned a lot in my career from bad leadership.
Mm-hmm.
But then later in my career, when I started, having leaders that were truly leaders to the letter, I learned so much more of what it means to be authentic, to be a leader, to care about your people, to put them first, and forget about all the stuff I learned from bad leaders of what not to do. Learning what to do to be a leader has completely just transformed my career.
Yeah. Are you a parent, Steve?
I am. Got two kids.
It's kind of like parenting. I mean, you take the good and you kind of eliminate the bad. And like, we're all traumatized. No parent is perfect. And I feel like as I raise my kids, I'm picking and choosing the type of parent I want to be, which is very similar to what you're saying. It's like those observations, and as humans, it's our nature to really focus on the bad or the tragic or, what is really wrong. But it's equally important to recognize the little things that go so far and made us who we were. And if we can pay that forward, that's what it's about.
Yeah, absolutely. So A minute ago, you were talking about when you were just building your company from the ground up, and you started, just implementing or just, learning what, what you want when it comes to a culture. When it comes to just your mindset through that process, how did it look when you were looking at just your business goals, right? We're in business to make money, to make a difference in the world. And so culture sometimes, when we're figuring that out, we don't know what's best for our team. But in those early days of starting up CS recruiting,
Mhm.
what was that mindset behind building this culture that you're well known for today?
You know, I don't want to say that it was selfish, but when I look back, I built a culture that I wanted to be a part of. And I was insane when I started my business. It was about a month after I'd had my third son. So I had three kids under four. And, with childcare, with being at the preschool, holiday party and the carpools, I wanted to create a culture where I hired adults and I empowered them and I trusted them and gave them, this freedom to work autonomously. And something that's interesting about what we did was my very first employee, she lived in the city of Chicago and our office was out in the suburbs. And I knew I wanted to hire. She's actually still with me today, 13 years later, as our COO. But her deal was the commute. She had to take a bus to the train and then walk from the train to our office. And she said, I can't do it every day. It's an hour and a half each way. And so I made her a deal in the offer that she could work from home 2 days a week. And, we weren't calling it hybrid back then. This was 2010.
Yeah.
Obviously today it's much more common. But then when I hired my second employee, I had to give her the same deal, and the third. And we shifted the parameters a little bit where our new hires, we wanted them in the office 5 days a week for the first 3 months for training. And then, they would slowly earn that first day at home. But really, when we were an in-office company, our entire team was only in the office 3 days a week and home 2 days a week. And we were so ahead of our time. But all I was doing was accommodating their needs and their season of life. And those were my needs too, the flexibility. And so I don't want to say it's selfish, but I do think that's an important thing for job seekers is you have to look at the leaders and their values and their leadership and work style. And if they lead the company the way they live, then you're probably going to get some ripple effect from that.
Interesting. So, it sounds like this was just you developed these policies just out of necessity. You had great people that needed a hybrid schedule, and you made accommodations, and then you wanted to be fair for the next set of hires to do the same. So it wasn't like you had a policy in the very beginning that said this is how many days you can work from home versus in the office. You just kind of leaned into your team's needs and the needs of the business and found, just that good mix to accommodate both.
Exactly. And I mean, I was an early entrepreneur. I don't remember the exact conversation, but I know it wasn't something I just came up with. It was between her and I figuring out, like, how can we make this work? What kind of offer do you need to see to accept this position? And we chuckle about it now because we're like that one, just decision that we made together really ended up creating this culture that we became known for. And a lot of it was a culture of empowerment and trust and autonomy, which we still have today as a fully remote company.
I got to ask, I've been in a lot of C-suite boardrooms, walking down the halls of them. Everyone has their vision statement, their core values. Yeah. Do you have that? Did you have that? Yeah. Walk me through that.
I love talking about values because that is something I don't think I regret any of the decisions we made, but I have learned so much about the importance of them, again, through building my own team and through just observing and learning about our clients' cultures and the cultures of our job seekers, previous roles. When we first started the business, maybe 2 years in, we came up with our first round of values. We were probably a 5 or 6 person company. A few years later, as we started to mature, we moved offices, had a big conference room, And this was probably 7 years into the business. And we really hunkered down and as a team brainstormed and thought about what we wanted our values to be. And we came up with 16 words. And I actually still have these in my basement, these little like chalkboard frames. And we had a word on each frame and they were in our conference room. And we referred to them here and there, but they were incredibly generic. I mean, you could, whatever you think they were, they were. We had 16 values.
Wow.
And yeah. And then in 2020, as things shifted and my role in the company shifted, I really just embraced, this idea of culture and community and trust, and going back to this idea of values have got to be our North Star. It's got to be the one thing that we consistently make decisions on, the one thing that can consistently attract or repel the right and wrong talent to our team. And we put a lot of work into it. So in 2020, there were a couple books I read. There was just a couple. I was obsessed with just getting them right. And so we changed them for the third time. Very proud to say that they still exist today, almost 5 years later. And we believe in them, and our team believes in them. And what we've really done very intentionally is we live our values. And so we were mindful about selecting values, not just we have a value of empathy. Okay, that's great. We could say it all day, but what does it mean? That was an example of an old value. That's actually not one of our current values, but I'll give you an example. One of our current values is make a difference. And there's so many ways that can apply. One of the things that we do is we have a Make a Difference Day every year where we give our employees the day off to go volunteer their time. We organize a couple of different volunteer events if people want to join us or if they want to go off and do it on their own, but it's a paid day off to truly make a difference in something that's important to you. And that was our big shift. And I mean, I would hope and think every employee on our team could name our 5 values, because we have awards around them. We have days around them. We have policies and processes around them. And it's not easy, but once you commit to that, you kind of work backwards. You're like, okay, we're going to come up with values that represent who we are. And then we're going to continue to just live and breathe these values and, prove it every day that these make sense for the organization we are today.
Yeah, that's, I appreciate that. You mentioned, that your values are your North Star.
Mm-hmm.
The company I'm with, we every decision that we make, we reference our values, we reference our vision, and we have to ask ourselves every day. Doesn't matter what initiative we're working on, or wanted to cancel, or the way we treat each other, or our associates and customers, but we always ask ourselves, does this point to our values? Does it point to our vision? And if it doesn't, we don't even need to argue about it.
Mm-hmm.
Let's move on to something that does.
Exactly. And that can shift over time too. I mean, one of our values that we probably refer to most is do what's right. And for many years, I think I thought do what's right is do what's right for the business, do what's right for the customer, do what's right to, retain this account. And as I built my team, I've really shifted my thinking, and I have to look at the situation differently now because there's so many parties involved. And so, like, I know you get it, when you place a candidate at a job and, let's say they're not happy or your client isn't happy, you've got the he said, she said, you've got the job seeker, you've got the hiring manager or leader, you've got the recruiter on our team, the account manager on our team. And it's like, okay, we've got to do what's right, but who is it right for? And we've really just leaned into looking at things more subjectively. Certainly we want our customers to be happy, but there are situations where they're not right. And we have to do what's right for the job seeker, even though, as the job seeker is not bringing in revenue directly. They don't pay us for a service, or do what's right for our employees. And so it's been challenging, but I would say that one value has guided us in a lot of decisions and a lot of hard decisions. It's like, it's that one thing I know I have to make a hard decision and I'm going to be able to evaluate it and come back and confirm, like, does it match these values? And if so, it's like the validation that we're doing the right thing.
Wow, that's beautiful. Do what is right.
Yeah.
I really like that.
Yeah. And then you think about it like, well, what is right in this situation? And we deal with a lot of sticky situations in the industry that we both play in.
Yeah. Well, so now that you've originally 2 years in, you've developed this, set of values, and then 7 years in, you really defined those and you came up with these 16 words. And then after that, you started refining it to the values that really matter. So there's been an evolution of, what really matters for your business. I want to hit on just a couple things. Now that you've worked through all that, you've developed your culture, your value system, you've seen what works, you've seen what maybe didn't work. What does a people first culture look like in practice? And then my follow-up question is, how does building a people first culture impact your overall retention and the satisfaction of your employees and your customers?
Mm-hmm. So what does it look like is so tough to answer, because like it's like when describe your culture, and it's a vibe, it's a feeling, it's an energy. But when I think about a people first culture, if I had to really simplify it, it's this idea of treating people like humans and knowing who they are beyond their title. And it really is that simple. I think, a lot of times in this workforce, we go through the motions, and there's Debbie, the accounting clerk, or, John, the receptionist. And that is who they are to us. And I was raised like, always be nice to the janitor. That person has a life. They have a family. They have emotions and wins and losses. And that's kind of how I look at my team and encourage them to look at each other and to look at every job seeker candidate and every client we deal with. It's a relationship business. And so if we stick to business, we're going to stay transactional. We're going to stay surface level. And so getting to know someone behind their title can look very differently in a lot of different settings. I mean, for us, it's consistent check-ins every week where we spend the first couple minutes. How are you? What's on your mind? What's going on, this weekend or last weekend? And what do you want to share with me? Obviously, we're doing, consistent feedback reviews, so they know that they will have this opportunity to talk and maybe share more than just, the positives and negatives about their production. We do a lot of team events and, play some silly games sometimes, whether it's virtual or when we get together live. This last event we had, our HR director put together. Do you remember the game Heads Up?
Yes.
So she did a hilarious thing. She created these little heads up boards with every team member's picture, and we played heads up, but you really had to know about these people on both sides. If I was going to say this person likes baseball, I know that. Does the other team know that? And we learned so much about each other, and it was just a simple half-hour team building activity that we all learned a lot, laughed a lot. And, that something so simple like that can accomplish the mission. Other things we do are we care about our employees and the recognition and, any type of award opportunity. So when we have a new hire, sometime in their first week of onboarding, we have them communicate to us, what's your favorite candy? Like, what is your favorite lunch? What's your Starbucks order? We actually have our employees go on to create like a list on Amazon of things, $5 gifts, $25 gifts, $100 gifts. And so when we have a Secret Santa, or us as a company, we want to give someone something for a milestone or accomplishment, or maybe just to cheer them up. It's like we have that information. And it's such a simple thing. So I could go on and on about it, but I think it really shines when you talk about recognition, just knowing, what do people need? What do they want? And, a gift card is better than nothing, but wouldn't you rather give someone a Dunkin' Donuts gift card than a Starbucks one if you know that they don't drink Starbucks?
Right.
It's just those little gestures that go so far. And we are very just mindful of getting that information and actually using it and applying it.
So it sounds like to me that, you've really personalized we'll use the corporate speak here, your retention strategies, your employee engagement. You've taken it down to the human level, the individual level. What does this person really care about? What excites them? And also what keeps them up at night?
Mhm.
And so when you're looking at ways to, keep your team happy, you're leaning into that person as an individual and what their needs are versus just, something that's transactional that it can be for anybody, like a
Yeah.
Starbucks gift card.
Yeah, exactly. I'll tell you a story that, at the time I didn't think anything of it, but when you asked this question, I think that this is a really good real life example. So 10 years ago, we had a new hire. It was maybe 2 weeks into her employment, and our office phone rang, and our now HR director, who was our office manager back then, answered the phone, and it was our new employee's mom, and she was hysterically crying. Her parents had been in Colorado skiing. Her dad had a terrible ski accident. They were rushing him to a hospital. Her mom was frantic. And we did what any normal human would do. We hung up the phone. We said, don't worry about it. We will take care of her today. We made sure she got home. We told her to take a couple days off work. We checked in with her the next morning, the people who needed to know cover for her. And, that happened. Great. So 8 years later, about 2, 3 years ago, I went to her wedding, and her parents came up to me, and I had never met her parents. And they said, we always tell people about, where she works and what you guys did for her when she was just a brand new employee. And I was like, well, what did we do for her? And they're like, just the way you handled that. Like, that meant so much to our family. And, we know how much parental influences, the decisions we make in our careers. And I'm not saying that because we did that, she stayed with our company, but the fact that 8 years later, that's what they think of when they think of our company, and where they think of their daughter going to work every day and believing that she's just in good hands because she's
Yeah.
working with good, caring people. So again, you can't have a policy that says this is what we do in these situations, but it's hiring good people, really spreading that idea of, caring about them as humans and empowering everyone on the team to do what they need to do to support each other.
Absolutely. That's a wonderful story. It's sad what happened, but the
He's
fact.
fine. He's fine. Her dad turned out great. Everything is fine today. I should preface that, but yeah, it's just those little things.
A while back, just a few years ago, I had one of those aha moments as a leader of like, wow, what I did truly made a difference in someone's life. And I had a department manager of a retail store that I was managing. This was like 15 years ago.
Mhm.
And she was really, just missing a lot of days. And she comes to my office one day and says, I'm giving you my 2 weeks notice. This is too stressful. I just can't handle the workload. And so I said, look, I accept your 2 weeks notice, but let me just offer you this. I want you to take the next 2 weeks off paid. You're going to use your PTO.
Mhm.
And if you're feeling a little bit better, you're not so stressed anymore, you're ready to come back, we're here for you. We're ready, open arms. But if it's still too much, you just got 2 weeks of paid time off that you wouldn't have gotten before for your 2 weeks notice. So she took the 2 weeks and she came back. Everything was normal. Life went on. It was probably 7 or 8 years later, I get a message from her saying, I posted on my Facebook about, emotional health and, mental fitness and, how we need to take that time off to really recharge and take care of ourselves. And she said, Steve, you don't know this, but when you gave me that 2 weeks off, I was suicidal. I was ready to end it. I was suffering with depression. And so I went and got help during that 2 weeks and saw a therapist and got help. And she's like, you just don't know how much that meant to me and how much it changed my life and allowed me to get back on my feet.
Yeah.
And that was the first time that I just really recognized that, these are people just like you and I. We have challenges every day, and we have to connect with them at that human level, at that personal level. And I didn't lose anything out of that, even if she quit after 2 weeks. But the fact that she was able to get back on her feet and continue her career because I just recognized enough to know that she was stressed and I needed to give her that time off.
That's such a good story. And it's like, unfortunate that I think a lot of leaders just would have accepted her resignation and went on with their day.
Yeah.
And it's that little moment where you're like, wait, we can do this together. We can, at least try to solve this or put a Band-Aid on it and see what happens. So yeah, I love that she remembered that. And that's something, and I guarantee that however she shows up in her professional life, she pays it forward, because that one situation, it's like, you just need that one situation to continue to make other people feel the way you felt if it did something.
Yeah. So, at the end of the day, we all run a business. We have to keep our customers happy. We got to keep producing revenue and profits. And, I see this in many organizations where culture kind of, prioritizing, people kind of gets in the way of the demands of the business. I don't like saying it that way, but that's really what you see out there with a lot of leaders is they have great intentions in the beginning, but when the rubber meets the road, they start prioritizing the business and the profits and less the people. And you hear that saying, "I'm just a number," and people feel like they're a number. And so, how do you prioritize that balance? How do you work through that? Because I know it's a challenge. I would assume it's a challenge.
It's a challenge. Yeah, and it's this idea of, you can always care about someone and show that you care and show that you see them as a person, even if you're having a hard conversation, even if you're making a decision that isn't going to work for one of you. And so, when you run a business, I know if I go out there and I say, we are people over profit all day, every day, I would be judged by other leaders like, okay, yeah, let's just wait and see until that one day. And it has to be both. It has to be people and profit, because if there is no profit, there is no business and there are no people. And so what I've tried to do is just lean into, when we bring someone onto our team, like, we start caring for them as a team member, an important team member. When we have hard times, we still care for them. If we had to make hard decisions, we still care for them. And, there's always going to be perceptions and mixed emotions, but I try very hard to handle every situation like that. And even the hardest situations where, it's just like, this is not easy for me, but I know this is not going to be easy for you. And just thinking about, like, what would you want if you were that person and you were in their shoes, and your boss was about to approach you? Like, how would you want them? There's no good way, but what's the best way? And so I think that's how you have to think. And you also, I think one thing that's been hard about that is, we hire employees of all levels, of all, experience levels, some right out of college, some have, 10, 15 years of work experience, but you don't know where everyone comes from and what everyone thinks. And it is very basic business acumen. Like, you've got, revenue and you've got costs. And if the revenue is not there, you got to cut the cost. And it's the math game. But then you've got the people in the middle. And so how do you keep that connection of balancing running a business and just the little things? And I think it is truly just those little things that make a difference. And sometimes you don't see it till you go to a place that doesn't have that. But that's when you can look back in hindsight and be like, wow, I took that for granted, or I didn't appreciate that, Steve made me that offer. Like, it changed my life that I stayed at that company, literally. So sometimes it's just a lot of reflection too, and reminders, unfortunately.
Yeah. Sometimes you learn the hard way.
Mm-hmm.
I think you have to. I really like setting expectations at the beginning with new hires of, like, look, we are going to go through the good and the bad together. And I can't remember who coined this question. It might have been Simon Sinek, but instead of asking, like, what are your strengths and weaknesses, he would ask on the weakness side, like, I don't like surprises. Mm-hmm. So tell me, like, what are, like, those triggers for you? Like, what are things that, I should expect where you're not going to be at your best because XYZ happened? Like, maybe you don't like to be micromanaged. So when you are micromanaged, you start to really, block yourself off from everybody, and you start going down this downward spiral and get worse and worse. Like, so what are those what are those for you, right? And so if you can understand, the best way to lead a team, through the good and the bad, and how people want to be led, now you're connecting at that personal level, and you, as a leader, you can really understand how to lead each individual to bring the best out of them.
Yeah.
But Charlie, there sometimes people are just not a good fit, regardless of how great you treat them.
Yeah.
They put their best foot forward, but it's just not working out. And so I think that's where leaders struggle, is that empathy, but also that accountability. And so how do you, what do you say to those leaders that struggle with that balance?
Hire good managers. No, I mean, I think that is something that I struggle with a lot, because as an entrepreneur, when I started my business, I did not plan to scale it and grow it. I planned to just stay, as a solopreneur and have a nice little lifestyle brand. And the opportunities came my way and I took advantage, which led to us scaling and growing. But yeah, you have to go back to that place where you remember like what you even did it for. And it's for the people, it's for the culture, and it's for doing this together, building, like, I just like to say, we're all here to create the culture that we want to be a part of. And I know that that's going to look different to you. It's going to look different to them. But if we can all collaborate, we can really do something pretty cool together.
Yeah. You might agree with this, but when you're in a leadership role, you really have to be your most authentic self.
Mm-hmm.
And you really want to live that and allow your team to be their authentic self, because when we're on the same level playing field, we're both being authentic, we can work through the challenges together, and have that empathy, but also have an understanding of, we are accountable to this, and we're gonna work through it one way or another.
Yeah. And I think I like what the Simon Sinek quote. I've heard that before. And I think you could be very intentional about that also. Like, he clearly is providing advice to have that conversation. If you're not having those conversations, and you do assessment tests, that's something that I love. We don't do assessment tests to make hiring decisions, but once we bring someone on our team, I want to know their Myers-Briggs. I want to know their DISC. I want to know, like, we've got 4 or 5 assessments that not only teach us about each other, but about ourselves and how we work best with these other styles. And so, yeah, it's like, have the conversation or find another way to get this information from them, whether they realize it or not, because they're going to have a much better experience if you cater to their needs. And yeah, knowing someone doesn't like surprises would change the way I interacted with someone if I had that information. Absolutely.
I found through all the companies I've worked with, the thousands of people that I've personally hired throughout my career, I've found that the majority of people in leadership positions just they don't know what they don't know. Mm-hmm. And they just learn what they've learned through the leaders they've grown up with. But I find, to keep it simple, I just find a lot of people are more focused on the numbers, accountability, just driving the business, and less about the people. And it's not intentional. Mm-hmm. It's just natural to them. They don't know another way. And so, for the vast majority of new leaders out there, what tips could you give them when they're responsible for a team, or they're starting a business and they're growing? What are some of those tips that they could easily implement to just build that people first culture?
Yeah, I think it probably starts somewhere with, like, making space for the conversations, making space for the feedback, making space so a leader can actually listen. And then beyond that, it's like I said in the beginning, it's like working with those employees based on where they are at the time. So, something I've always done, and this is funny, because one of my early bosses used to leave me like a little Post-it on my desk, and sometimes there'd be a gift card or not, but it would just say, like, thanks for staying late, or like, appreciate your work finishing up that project. And I received these little Post-its. I'd smile, throw them in my drawer, but then I started doing that, and all I did was pay it forward. And I thought, what made me feel good when I was, an entry level employee, and it cost her nothing. I mean, occasionally it may be a $5 Starbucks gift card to buy myself a coffee, but beyond that, it was the thought and it was the gesture. And so I think it truly is just about those little things. And the more you understand your people and where they are, the more you can, co-create policies and philosophies and processes, but you also can do something that simple that there's no excuse. And I'm not saying everyone needs to go out there and start, writing Post-its and leaving them on everyone's desk, but, gratitude is one way. We all have the ability to say thank you, to acknowledge someone, to Slack them, to email them, to DM them, to text them, to leave a Post-it. And so that's the kind of stuff I encourage, is like, what little thing would make me feel better? And what can I do that's in my power to help guide this person?
Yeah, I'll be the first to tell you that's hard for me to do. Intrinsically, I'm thinking that was amazing. Thank you for staying late. And I might even go the next day, hey, thanks for staying late. Appreciate it. And then just, life goes on. And, I think for me, for several years now, I've worked really hard to just be thoughtful, to write those notes, to make those phone calls, to say thank you. But I think there's a lot of people out there that are like me, that just, we are thankful, but we don't express it. It's just, it's not natural for whatever reason.
Yeah. And that is a hard thing when you scale a business, because the last thing you want it to do is feel forced. So it's not like, it might work, but you could put a little alert on your calendar. Like, the last thing you do before you close your laptop is you reach out to 3 people you wouldn't have otherwise talked to, or you acknowledge those gestures. But as you scale, you do need to formalize it in some way. One way that we do this that's so simple is we have an employee engagement platform, and every Thursday, our team members go in and answer a series of questions. It's basically they're communicating with their manager about their week, and it's setting up their agenda for their next week's check-in with their manager. And we just started adding a question to that every week. The questions change throughout, but every week there's one consistent question, and it says something like, is there anyone on the team you want to recognize? And they could leave it blank, but they see it. It's in front of them every Thursday. And when they write in that message box, it actually goes into one of our Slack channels that's #celebrate. And so the whole company sees it and they know that. But it's that little reminder. And if for some reason they don't want it to be public, it's still the reminder to reach out to someone. But it's amazing. It's like that little, Thursday afternoon around like 3 or 4 o'clock, all of a sudden our Slacks are like ding, 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 because they're prompted. And if I prompted you right now, like, you have to thank 3 people, like, you could come up with 3 people that have made your life better this week, whether it was the cashier at McDonald's or your wife. But it's just that prompt, that trigger. So yeah, you don't want it to feel forced, but you do sometimes need to prompt it or guide it a little.
Yeah, that's an important point, because you're right. As your organization grow, or if you're already part of a large company, you have to be intentional and start formalizing the way you show gratitude to your team and to your colleagues. And if it's a calendar reminder, if it's a Slack channel, whatever it is you need to keep yourself, reminded to go and thank those around you for what they do. And it's just like when you were a toddler, you didn't learn, you started learning that hello, good morning, how are you? Those are just pleasantries that, were scripted for you early. You learned the script, but over time it became natural. It just, when you see someone, you smile, you ask them how their week was. That is natural for us adults, but as kids, it's not. You have to learn that. And so I think the same goes with what you're speaking to is, you may have to formalize it at first, but the more practice, the more natural it can become. And you can naturally just know how to express being empathetic versus it being forced.
Yeah. And I think for us, it was like the opposite. It was like, that was who I was, and I wasn't going to force everyone to do it. That was never a thought of mine. But as we grew, it's like, yeah, you're just creating the culture you want to be a part of. Like, we naturally created a culture of care, and it may or may not start with one person, but it feels good, and then people embrace it, and then they realize, like, that was such a simple thing. I don't know why I don't do that. So yeah, it's an interesting topic because you never want it to be inauthentic, but you do get to a point where you might need a reminder, and that's still genuine. If you took the time to put a reminder on your phone to thank someone, you're still thinking about that act. You may just not know who you're going to thank yet that day. But it's that pause that we don't take.
The owner of the company I work for, who I report to, he shared with me a practice that he does every day. He's got his little notebook, and every morning, before the start of his day, he's writing down 2 or 3 things that he's thankful for, or somebody that he's thankful for, and it puts you in that mindset to start your day of putting your people first. And I've tried that. I haven't been consistent, but I'm going to be, because I truly see the benefits of, being able to, acknowledge the things you're thankful for, the people you're thankful for and what they're doing, and then actually go and tell them.
Yeah. And I've done that too. And I will admit, I'm not super consistent, but every time I get in a rhythm, like, I'll start that first day and be like, what am I grateful for? But I'm grateful for this cup of warm coffee. And that is enough for just me to stop and like take it in and realize other people don't have that. And then the more you do it, the more natural it becomes. And then you're almost like out there looking for things to acknowledge your gratefulness and your gratitude. It's like, so it does become like a part of life and a habit. If you don't write it down every day, it still doesn't mean that you're not thinking and behaving that way.
Well, and what I want to wrap this up with, a couple thoughts, is it starts at the top. It starts with you, regardless of whatever position you're in. If you can be that authentic person, if you can meet people where they're at and humanize them and get to know them, find out what keeps them up at night, what motivates them, what inspires them. If you can embrace that as an individual, as a leader, and then really build that culture where everyone else, feels inspired to do the same. I mean, Charlie, can you imagine what a team like that could accomplish, what a company like that could accomplish?
Exactly. Yeah. And it's sad that there's not a lot of companies that we can identify that live that way. But there are some, and you know which ones those are, and you feel it when you're a customer of theirs too. And that's where it all, is a full cycle that leads to the bottom line.
Well, and I have a sense that is something that your team, your culture lives, that we could all learn from.
We try.
So just to wrap things up, we're coming up on time. Really appreciate the time today with you. What's next for you? What, in your mission to create more people first organization, what's down the road for you?
Yeah, down the road for me is sharing my message. And I mean, part of what we're doing today, I have been speaking in, the last 12, 13 years of my career. But for the first decade, I spoke a lot, at conferences or events about recruiting and supply chain and transportation. So you want 5 interview tips, or you want to know what the over the road forecast looks like for next quarter. And I really stuck to those scripts. And then in the last couple of years, I've just freed myself a little, getting in front of different audiences or being a little fluffier than I normally would have been. And that is what inspires me, is sharing the message that we just had a conversation about and sharing a couple little actionable tips. So, my goal is to, I don't want to say I want to be a thought leader. I think that's kind of strange to have that, but it is that idea of like, how can I inspire more leaders in our industry, out of our industry? How can I inspire aspiring leaders who will be our future leaders? And it's just these types of conversations. And I guarantee one person is listening to this and is going to take away something, because we both took this time to share. And I'd say that's really my passion, is how can I share and support the recruiting business in the it all comes back around, but spreading the message in a higher volume.
Absolutely. I love that. Well, it's been a delight getting to know you today, having this conversation about people first cultures. I've learned a lot. you've also inspired me to be better, to recognize those people around me and be more intentional about it. Where can people find you, Charlie, if they want to get a hold of you?
I am on LinkedIn more hours a day than I will ever admit. But yeah, come find me on LinkedIn and follow our company page as well. I put out a lot of content. And if you're looking to hire professional talent, or you are a professional looking for a new opportunity in logistics, supply chain, or transportation, hit me up. I'd love to know you.
Wonderful. Well, thank you again. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Next week, we will be live in-person sit-down interview with John Viev. She is a social media marketing manager. She's going to talk about 360 marketing when it comes to recruiting, leads, and business development. So you don't want to miss out on that episode next week. And everybody have a great weekend. Thanks, Charlie.
Thanks, Stephen.
Six months ago, I get a call from Steve Farrell, who wants to talk about partnering with Yes for our labor needs. It would
change your approach to staffing.
Change my approach to staffing?
We're short on employees. Again. So we're going to have to shut down a line. Sorry.
I told him I've already used multiple agencies and have had headaches with each one. So my approach to staffing is just fine.
With multiple agencies, we thought we had our staffing needs covered.
I had negotiated a super low rate to save on labor costs.
And I could pursue my passions outside of work because I never had to stay overtime due to turnover, productivity, or training issues.
The agency sent quality people. Well, they sent people. Sometimes.
My love of language and lexicon languished.
I negotiated a super low rate.
Hey, the agency employees didn't show up, so we're short on staff again.
Dang it. Bupkis. Curses. Fetch.
Hey, an agency sent an employee.
Do you have production experience?
I've produced YouTube videos. I'm hungry. When's my first break?
This is not sustainable. If you want happy customers and a healthy business, something's gotta change. So yes, we tried Yes.